Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, now what? Now we turn to another option at quarterback for Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders. Donovan Smith up to bat again. What's the plan in week 2 as the Red Raiders take on top 25 at Houston? And how will things change when it comes to Zack Kittley's approach with another signal caller? We get into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right.
Glad to have you along for the ride once again on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day. Thanks for making it your first listen, part of the podcast Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Casey Cowan along with Chris Level, and we're talking now what? As it was a 63-10 win for Texas Tech over Murray State on Saturday night. But of course, as you know by now, the Red Raiders dealing with, well, a new plan being thrust upon them as we're waiting to see what the ultimate timeline will look like for Tyler Shuck, Chris. But we know as far as the immediate future is concerned, it seems like Donovan Smith and maybe others will be there with opportunities to take the reins.
Yeah, man, Cowan, this is the part that about this, this sport, and it just sucks. I think, Joey elaborated about collarbone or AC joint, but I mean, he's, I hate it for the kid, at least it's September, you hear some of those things. It just appears all the optics are suggesting on all fronts that Tyler is going to be out for some time. I just don't know what the actual injury is. I have my suspicions, but based on just how he reacted, and he kind of went under his shoulder pad and visibly see when he was driven to the ground after that one QB run. But yeah, you just quickly turn the page. So all this depth we talked about, this great QB room, it could be missing one for a period of time. And Tyler was on the sideline with that arm in a sling in the second half and seemed in good spirits. But yeah, you just worry about him personally, just because, geez, man, he's worked every day since that happened last year. And you just hope that, that he gets some sort of good news. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's fair for us to say this is going to be Donovan's show for a period of time. I think that's what the information would point to, and we'll see, as you mentioned, what word we get. But I thought he looked really good. Now, and we have to remember, there's a reason Tyler Shuck won the job over Donovan and Barron. There's a reason, and I think Zach basically told everybody on Monday, I think last week, look, there's not anybody in this building that would have felt any different from GAs and trainers and players and us as coaches. In fact, me and Joey didn't even talk about the decision. So because it was just kind of an assumption based on the way they'd played. Okay, so let's just move all that to the side. But now Donovan will lean on some of that experience from last year and start to quarterback this thing. And I'm kind of curious to see kind of what that looks like, because Zach now has to kind of pivot a bit with what he will do offensively. To what extent the pivot is going to be, I think, is certainly the thing that we're all wondering about. But before we get to that, the timeline for Donovan Smith, I mean, here's another guy that's easy to root for. We've talked about Tyler Shuck being easy to root for. How about this experience for Donovan Smith to go through what he did last year, to do the things that he did within the regular season when called upon, and then being a huge part of a big bowl win, and then your QB2 whenever the opening weekend finally arrives. And now you're right back into the spotlight. I mean, you want to talk about a test of some mettle and some moxie, a gut check. Here's one for Donovan Smith. But the wild thing is, he's already done it before. He's practiced this exact scenario, and he may even have a little bit more time this season, Chris, to establish some chemistry early on with his teammates. I know it wasn't late in the season last year when he arrived, but a few games in the books whenever his chance did finally come to be. But the guy's done this before, and you think about the patience and some of those things paying off as far as the ability to stick with this kind of thing. Well, here you go. This is why, because you never know
when or how quickly things can change. And all of a sudden you're right back at the top of the list. It's really just wild to consider the things, the emotions, all the above that he's probably going through.
Yeah, I think this is a benefit of letting the quarterback race go on as long as it did, and investing a lot of reps into Donovan and Barron, and being fairly even with those through the better part of fall camp before a decision was made. Because it's it's just hard to get guys live reps, but Donovan will now lean on that experience and these extra reps that he's seen. And I thought he looked good, man, against Murray State. I mean, he came in and didn't miss a beat, 14 of 16. And I tell you what was kind of interesting is that I think that people have in their mind that he comes in and he's more of a runner, and he is, but he didn't really do much of that last night. And I thought it was, or Saturday night. Sorry, my days are all mixed up. We got holidays and everything, but against Murray State, I think he really threw the ball down the field, and I think he was very, very accurate. Now, if you're Zack Kittley and so let's just hypothetically suggest that Tyler is out for a period of time, a few weeks, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever. Do you now alter the way you call it and maybe not necessarily put those guys in harm's way by calling QB runs, even though that's what Donovan can do, and I think that's what he's really good at? Do you alter that? I mean, possibly, or do you just kind of say, let's just call the game as we normally would, and if some of that is involved, so be it. Donovan's a big kid. We were going to put him in red zone situations and things like that, like Sonny Cumbie did last year with certain packages and things like that. So that part I'm kind of curious, because that's now something that Zach is going to have to think about and try to determine. But yeah, you go from, if you're Donovan, you go from 2 to 1, and if you're Barron, you go from 3 to 2.
Yep.
And on the depth chart, and I'm curious to see kind of what all changes, if much. A whole bunch. I don't know, but Donovan's more than capable. You've seen it, and he's Liberty Bowl MVP. He's beat Iowa State last year. Maybe that was Jonathan Garibay, but still, he put yourself in positions to win Big 12 games. He was a big part of as a part-time player at that game versus West Virginia last year when he did some things up in Morgantown. You got that win, so he's seen this, but now he kind of is tasked with, you may be handed the keys here.
Yeah, and I really feel like the thing that I'm most glad to feel like I know something about when it comes to Donovan Smith is the intestinal fortitude. The fact that the lights are not going to be shockingly bright to him. There's not going to be anything intimidating about leading a huddle, playing in crunch time. All of those kind of intangible experiences he's already gone through. Chris, I think you see a lot of guys that get thrust into a situation like this, and that they're here for a reason. They're talented football players and capable of doing good things, but I think it's always, kind of the intangible part of it that separates those who are able to make good things happen sooner rather than later, or not. And Donovan Smith clearly has put all of those things on display here before. So glad to not necessarily have to worry about that so much. But how do you think physically and with what they can do on the field, what are some real differences between Shuck and Smith?
Well, I think Donovan's natural, the things that he can do that Barron or Tyler couldn't is really, get out in the open field and almost act like a running back. I think the other two are athletic. You just, Tyler, if he just learned to slide or kind of give up, but he's just tough and trying to get those extra yards, and it maybe has cost him. But I think, Donovan's got a big arm. I just think there's some more things you can do in the run game. Now, that's the rub, though. Does Zach feel comfortable enough in calling some of that as much or any, or I don't know, knowing that, okay, I've got one other guy over there if we were to lose Donovan and he were to go down. But he's a big kid. He's strong. I think that, that's why they talked about short yardage stuff. I mean, he's 6'5", about 235, 240. He's going to move the pile. And, I think, though, that what you're not necessarily comfortable with yet, and maybe you're going to just have to, or you're going to have to train him up and get to that point to where he can really drop back and deliver it 30 times a game where it needs to go consistently and all those things. You see the flashes and all that, and I thought he looked good last night, but granted, it's Murray State. That's what's always fascinating too. You hammer a team like Murray State, and you get a lot of people going, Murray State's not that good. Yeah, but last year it was like, man, SFA must be pretty good. We always take these results and look at the opponent. So who knows how you're supposed to judge that? But we'll know really quickly because Donovan knows that he's about to get into. And Houston didn't see Donovan Smith last year. He didn't play in that game.
Right.
That was just Tyler Shuck for the better part of a half was all as much as Houston held the ball in the first half last year. But yeah, so and I think we've talked about this too, Casey. And the last point I'll make here is that he was voted team captain for a reason too. I mean, that tells you a lot about who he is and how he is viewed in that locker room. That he likely wasn't going to be the starting quarterback. However, I've seen, and you've seen these videos where Coach McGuire has him talk after practices or break the team down. And that tells you a lot about Donovan and how he's viewed by his coaches and teammates.
He addressed the brass section, the band entirely, but specifically the brass section, it looked like to me. And as a former trombone player, first chair, you don't let just anybody address the brass section.
You did? Trombone? I had no idea. See?
Of course.
Breaking news.
These luscious lips ain't just for talking, Chris. Let me tell you. But 7th, 6th grade braces ended my trombone career to some degree. It was a vicious battle. But that's a story for another episode. Coming up later on this episode, we're getting into main takeaways for both Chris and myself. Couple of sleeps on it and a chance to really digest what went down Saturday night at the Jones. And we'll give you those things that are sticking out primarily to us. But first, I'm going to give you your new favorite in the Built Bar universe. Have you tried the Built Bar Puffs yet? Because if you haven't, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? Brand new flavor. If you're ready for it, I'm giving it to you now. 3, 2, 1. Brace yourself. Cookie dough. Who has not wanted to indulge in cookie dough from time to time? But what did they tell you once upon a time? Like, hey, to make you grow a tail if you take another one off of mama's tray. I don't know what they came up with or if any of it was ever true, but they've been trying to keep us away from cookie dough for many, many years. Not Built Bar. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, of course, it's healthy for you. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family right now. It's the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place if you're a part of a family. More than likely, this is the case. And hoard them for yourself because everybody in the house is going to want them. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite. Built is the perfect protein bar. Tastes better than a candy bar, healthier too. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar, and grab yourself a Built Bar. Go to Built.com right now and use the promo code LOCKEDON15. Use the promo code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for making us a part of your day. It's your team every day. Your first listen right out the gates as we're talking Red Raider football once again. Game 1 in the rear view. And now looking ahead to the Houston Cougars. You got top 25 matchups coming up in the next few weeks, potentially, with your conference opener also representing something of a challenge as well. We'll get to all that and more coming up as we roll through the week. Still looking back on Saturday night, however, as the Red Raiders take down Murray State 63-10. And Chris, you and I have some primary takeaways after some hours to think on it, some days to think on it, and really reflect on what all was included there at the Jones. Yours is more so between the lines. I've got something a little bit more outside of the lines. Let's begin with yours. What was still sticking out to you? And I don't know if you'd call it a surprise. Was it something that caught you off guard? What was sticking out to you from Saturday night?
I think as people start to see, because I think people have been curious about what Coach Kittley's doing on offense and what Coach DeRuyter's doing on defense schematically. But I think you start to really grasp that And I thought we saw this quite a bit last night. The ball really goes downfield in this offense. I think Zach uses a lot of different personnel groups and a lot of motion and a lot of, it's very similar to the guy he learned from in Cliff Kingsbury, to where you just kind of move the chess pieces around the board in a variety of different ways to kind of create mismatches and try to get those. And then you teach your quarterback to try to pick on that. But I thought, Miles Price was a lot of times last night kind of a decoy turned out in a lot of the motions and fake jet sweeps and things like that. And it opens some things up down the seams, I think, way down the field. And so because again, I'm not sure that people necessarily understood kind of what you were going to get. But I guess my point is a lot more north-south passes than east-west. There was a few out to the flats and some short stuff and quick game stuff, but we've seen, and not that it will be that way all the time, but this is also, I think, what Murray State gave you, or they dictated this, and it's like, okay, if you're going to give us this is what we'll take. Because I think coming in, Joey had talked about on his coach's show, we think they'll really play back and try to eliminate the big play and try to keep everybody, keep all the Tex guys in front of them, but that's not really necessarily what we saw last night. But I thought, Tyler and Donovan and Barron really did a good job. How about that? 3 different quarterbacks throwing touchdown passes. May never see that again around here for a long time.
Yeah, it was something that definitely was unique. And I'll tell you what, the third guy that we saw involved, I thought had as much spin on the ball or zip on the ball as any of them. Maybe the most. So it kind of made you be more so excited about what Morton might look like whenever his opportunity arrives. But yeah, right out of the gates, you get a big hitter there with Jerron Bradley. But of course, you continue to do it. As far as passes over 15 yards, you had 14 of those chunk plays last night or a couple nights ago against Murray State. You went 39 to Bradley. How about Dank Hank, the new Dank Hank Teeter? 23. He's on the list. He wasn't one of my preseason big hitters as far as down the field, Chris, but props to the new Dank Hank. You had Fungi for 30, Fungi for 33, Bradley for another 30, Fungi for another 39. I mean, it just went on and on and on. Even Sir Roderick Thompson got in on the act. Some of the big plays were really, really nice to see, Chris. But I think, clearly when they all work out, yeah, we love them. But I think something that Tech fans will really appreciate, because it has been frustrating going back through some of the offensive coordinators that have been here, essentially since Mike Leach left campus, some of the hesitation to go down the field. Isn't there just something about being willing to take those shots or take those chances? And I'm not saying 4 verts and just be crazy or stupid with it, but I think Tech fans want to see, and probably most generally do, those shots taken. There's something about it also keeps the defense a little bit maybe more honest at the line of scrimmage. Don't you feel like even beyond just the fact that, hey, we love it when it works, you also like that play caller to be one of those guys that is aggressive that way?
Yeah, and the one thing I can say about Zach is that he's extremely creative, and I think he's very outside the box. And I think that's what it'll make it fun to kind of watch. Not everything will work. Sometimes it looks good or sounds good in theory or on paper, and then it's difficult to execute. But I think it also, in this portal era, it gets more people involved and keeps more people engaged. The more personnel groups and the more creative you can be. But against Houston and against NC State and probably Texas, you'll see a lot more man and press coverage. It'll be interesting to see kind of if your guys can get any sort of separation. But that's also where Zach comes in handy too, because he's creating some of these busted coverage by, route combinations and different motions. And again, moving those chess pieces around the board. And so he'll bear a lot of that, trying to get his guys open too. But it was fun to see Loic and Jaron really kind of start to maybe come into their own, and they're going to have to do a lot, many more weeks before we start talking about them as being consistent and all that. But
Right.
they certainly had a good start last night.
No question about it. So hopefully that continues.
I keep saying last night. It's like, again, this holiday, I'm just all
we're laboring on Labor Day. Surely
That's
everybody
right.
will understand.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was fully into, you saw the effort on the field for the Red Raiders. My effort on game day, tailgate wise, was 10 of 10. I didn't act like it was FCS Murray State on the other sideline, Chris. It was like a UT-worthy tailgate effort from your boys. So just know that if I don't quite return to myself till maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, I am working my way back. I'll be back at some point. But it's taking a little bit of time.
Beer drinking, and scooter riding. You were getting after it.
Yeah, I did take advantage of the return of the lime. I mean, it was at the bottom of the pedestrian bridge, like, a shining light from heaven, like Clark Griswold's Christmas tree. It was right there, and I thought, why not? Because I had a little bit of a hike out to the south of the track from north of Marcia Sharp. And I am sorry to anybody I made feel uncomfortable doing the zigzags on the pedestrian bridge. If I was you walking, I might have cussed me also, but I was cruising, so I couldn't feel too bad. And I made it without any spills. I mean, it was touch and go. Chris,
not a drop.
I mean, well, the drink also, but I was thinking more bodily harm myself. Whenever you're cruising down those streets, it's at the moment that you really know you're looking super cool. That's the most dangerous. That's when you really
karma will get you.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So you don't ever want to feel just too good about it. But yeah, man, I thought, and this really leads into my takeaway. I was surprised by mine, but pleasantly surprised to see the offseason vibe transition into week one. You had a great crowd on hand. I thought, the majority of the game that they remained for was a little bit surprising to me as well. The tailgate scene was off the hook. I know everyone's just glad to be back to football. I get so frustrated, Chris, with these FCS matchups and essentially the onus entirely being put on the fans to come out and generate this when the fans are paying to be entertained. I feel like the entire damn thing is backwards when you've got a plea to the customers, hey, come out and create a compelling product for us, because we don't have an opponent here that's going to create any type of game that's compelling for you. So that's a whole nother conversation. But in part, it's why I expect, very minimal enthusiasm or showing for those types of games. And that's why I say I was surprised by what we saw there at Jones Stadium and just the general scene there on campus over the weekend. I know that the vibe and the energy and the environment stood out to you as well, but was it a surprise to you in the way that I'm describing it?
Yeah, it felt different than any game I've been to. I think mainly because the speakers down on the field, the sound system, and the way that they worked the music almost after every, it wasn't on when you were on offense, but on defense, they were hitting you with it for 4 quarters. And it was I don't know any other way to explain it. And those speakers, like if you were on the west side, you probably don't really grasp what I'm saying. But if you're down the sideline, because they pointed those speakers and they're massive, I'll send you a picture of them. They're pointing toward the student section. But when you're down there, it's like rattling your insides. But it feels like, yeah, there was a lot of juice in the stadium. And I know Joey's just big on that and just trying to make this thing fun and a party and all those things. I mean, he even said in his post-game press conference last night, he was sad that they didn't get a turnover because he couldn't wait to play that Purge song that they play. I mean,
I thought I heard it pregame once.
Okay, but I did. But. Yeah, that's just kind of the difference. He's been very involved in the playlists and music and everything, according to him, and that's just something he wants to create this. And every coach has got their own spin on it and everything like that. But I think you nailed it. I think the crowd was great, and I'll tell you. You skip ahead to next weekend, and you're going to need that crowd. That crowd's going to have to do their part. It rattled Houston and San Antonio this past weekend, and you're going to need your home crowd to definitely help you this weekend versus the Cougs.
I think they can. I expect now, in a way that I did in this first week, maybe a better environment and maybe something that would resemble a home field advantage. I mean, it's been so long since a Tech fan has been able to feel like, the Jones was on one of those short lists of toughest places to play, particularly when you're coming in there on a Saturday night. But you had a decade's worth of that feeling at one time, Chris, and it wasn't the previous decade. Yeah. So I know it can happen, but isn't it kind of amazing how quickly the worm can turn and you can potentially lose that edge and find it, at least in my view, man, so difficult to regain. It's really been a chore, and it's ongoing more than a decade now. Maybe this is the year that you get back to some of that.
I hope so. I know hope's not a strategy, but I hope so, because you saw people were genuinely having fun last night, and you had quite a few folks stay for the second half, even though the game had long been since been decided. I keep saying last night again. I'm going to just like hit myself with a mallet every time I do that, and give myself -5 points.
If you
But
got a kid handy to stand beside
I
you.
know, yeah. But I was impressed by just the general vibe, and I'm telling you, man, it's just little stuff like speakers on the field that just kind of created a whole different environment, and it helps to play good football too. That's obviously a big key.
Sure.
So easier to feel good and all that, but it's going to be allowed for opposing teams to come in there when they're on offense. That much we can determine, and I can't wait for the first turnover in that stadium. I'm ready to hear the purge.
Yeah. How do you think, if you considered here quickly before we move on, I wonder how the sound could potentially change when you have south end zone renovations completed? Because I know there's maybe some chairs lost, but I also wonder if there might be some better containment of the sound actually with more of a taller structure there, a bigger structure.
I talked to one of the people heavily involved in that project last night, Cody Campbell, and we talked about the sound system. I mean, I didn't even know you were going to ask that. I said last night again. So, but Cody said, "Hey, it's very expensive, and there's a lot that goes to making it sound right." And what you're talking about, Casey, in that it's got a there's just a lot to it, but they have put a lot of time, and they're going to put a lot of resources in that aspect of it. I don't know the total cost of just sound system, but you're right. I think it's making sure that it's equal no matter where you are in the stadium and all those kinds of things. But that is something they're going to address. And whenever they are updating the stadium, that will be a big part of it. And then you've got the video boards in the corners, and and then obviously the beautiful structures and all that stuff. But yeah, they wanted to make sure that thing, you'd feel it when you're in there. And I think that they'll get that done, because again, he's the one, him and guys like Dusty Womble heavily involved in that they've ponied up a lot of money for those facilities. And so they're heavily involved in the planning and cost and all those things. He would know, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, they're not just heading over to Circuit City for some 6x9s either. So it's I'm sure an intensive.
It's like Vince Vaughn in Old School. Yeah,
exactly. Everybody, what, 15s, 25s, 135s? I don't even know what stadium size subwoofer actually is. And talking about the sound being equal throughout, I don't know if it needs to be exactly all that equal. You talked about the speakers being pointed over towards those east side riders. I don't know if the West Siders are going to need those bones rattled to that degree. So maybe for now, you do just keep it kind of key on the students, on the team, on Chris Level as he roams the sideline, and those East Siders. They're built a little different over there, Chris. I've experienced the difference myself.
And because my first thought was, and you know how this goes, you've experienced this too in some of our time in radio and the other things we've been doing. You'll get some, because again, the thing about a game day presentation, you're trying to hit all aspects of an audience, and you've got older season ticket holders, you've got students, you've got the don't get off my, or make sure you get off my lawn, and then the don't turn the music up too loud people. And man, I needed more juice when I'm in there. So there's all kinds of things they're trying to do. I have no idea what it would have sounded like if you were sitting in the West Side. I just know Coach McGuire said to me after the game, he's like, "Man, I'm walking by Tim DeRuyter, and he's like, I can't even hear Coach." And I think it was a compliment. But that I'm because I wanted to, if I would have been right there, be like, me neither, but I don't mind. I think it's great. It felt big time. It felt fun. It felt like a release, which is why we all love sports and college football and all that stuff. I mean, the environment's supposed to be juiced up, and that's why the pageantry and all that comes with it. But that's part of it, man.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you got to gear it towards those players. I don't think you do that at the expense of any decency or taste whenever it comes to like a drill rap song or something that they want played. But obviously, there's something that is geared towards players and at least tolerable for all portions of the audience. I think students have to be second on that list, Chris. And I'm thinking about those who are generating the energy. And so that's kind of how the list would honestly shape out. Of course, you want a family environment. You want it to be friendly to all of those of some sensitivity. But, once upon a time you appealed to the most reasonable person in the room, not the maniac in the room. That's unfortunately changed a little bit within our society. But I think you really can't go wrong if you are essentially trying to gear towards, the players and the students in mind first, but considering what type of environment at large you want to establish. And for the most part, I think Texas Tech typically does a great job of that. There was one particular 3-minute set once upon a time when I swear I heard Carly Rae Jepsen in the stadium, and I just felt like the world has turned upside down. But that's been a while, so maybe we've gotten out of that Carly Rae phase. Hey, we all had one whenever we were young, right? But it was great to see at the Jones, and I bet
I'm not willing to admit it. I'm not willing to admit it.
Yeah, you're still dealing with it inside. I understand. It's going to be even liver, litter, looser, louder, all the ers, I think, coming up next week when you're taking on a future conference opponent. I mean, there's going to be some more heat to this matchup in the years to come, right? So why not start now?
Yeah, I mean, and I think they'll amp it up quite a bit this weekend too. And you're gonna need to, and really, then Texas is the one after that. And I mean, You just kind of start to see the expectations and the urgency and the opponent increase. I mean, and then obviously Texas being a conference game, it adds a new tone. So I'm looking forward to it. The Murray State games are fun, because you're back and it's football and all that stuff. It's kind of a necessary evil but now really every home game you have coming up, the rest of the way, all 6 left. I mean, they're very, very meaningful. So I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Of course, we'll have plenty more this week on Locked On Texas Tech as we get ready for the Houston Cougars coming to town. And coming up in just a moment, be back for a quick hitter as we look around the conference. Red Raider Big 12 brethren, how'd they fare and what did it all mean? And as I mentioned, Houston coming to town next weekend to face the Red Raiders. You got one tailgate in the books now. You had some practice, some walkthrough, if you will. You try to iron out some wrinkles and figure out where some of those kinks are. I've got the tailgate staple for you as we roll into week 2. Jay's Salsa, owned and operated by a Texas Tech grad, is ready to be at your tailgate coming up this week. Why waste any time? Packed with fresh ingredients, bold flavors. Got the original, the hot salsa, going to be leaving you begging for the next bite. Whether you're looking for something mild, something with a little more heat, Jay's Salsa will be your next family staple, like it has been for a lot of families for over 2 decades now. You a mild man, Chris, or are you going to be in the little more heat category?
Bring it on. Mild, hot, green, blue, whatever. But this is a really good product, and I think you can get it at United or HEB, in and around Lubbock, but really across the state in the market streets and things like that. The jar is red and black. It's a Red Raider owned company, a family business, and we would love to support the folks at Jay's Salsa. You can go to jaysalsa.com. But I mean, again, you're helping one of your own there, and it's a really good product. I know a lot of people here in town and Lubbock and everything in the surrounding communities love it, and we certainly appreciate them being a part of this podcast too.
Yeah, no question about it. I want to support those who are supporting us and love supporting Red Raiders, which you can do here with Jay's Salsa. And Chris, that was the correct answer. It's kind of a trick question. Which one do you like? You're supposed to say all of it.
It's like my children. I mean, salsa flavors, children. Yeah, I like the same. And I don't have any blue kids. I don't know if there's blue salsa, but I would love them all equally. But jaysalsa.com.
Yeah, there you go. And like Chris said, look for the red and black jars at most United supermarkets, Market Streets, Albertsons markets in Texas and New Mexico, and right here in the LBK at HEB. It's available. Jay's Salsa Company, Red Raider owned family business. Visit them at jsalsacompany.com. That's jsalsacompany.com to learn more or ship anywhere in the U.S. That's jsalsacompany.com. Back for one more again on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us. We've been talking Red Raiders and Murray State. And, of course, as the week rolls on, we are back at it with Texas Tech and Houston, getting you set for the Red Raiders and Cougars coming up Saturday afternoon from Jones Stadium. Before we left you today, wanted to take a look around the Big 12 Conference. Certainly some interesting results. And, Chris, it may have mostly just been within what we saw there to kick off the weekend. West Virginia involved in one of the more high-profile games of the weekend, the Backyard Brawl. They fall 38-31. And Oklahoma State, 58-44. Thought it wasn't going to be interesting early on, but the Chippewas made it a little bit more interesting. What did you think about some of the decisions from Neil Brown within the Backyard Brawl? I thought there were some that were kind of, reminding me of his time here in Lubbock, and not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, I think the big decision was electing to punt toward the end. And I think, you could have, if you'd have gone for it, maybe put the game away. I think he was asked about that. I think he, and there's been some people that still say, man, it's the right call. But that's what he said after the game. Is like, hey, man, if I had to do it over again, this is what I'd still do. This is just the right decision, even though it didn't work in this particular case. But, and I think that maybe bothered some people that he didn't have some sort of regret. They've got a weird non-conference schedule though, because I don't think Virginia Tech is very good. They lost to Old Dominion this weekend, but you're trying to play if you're West Virginia, and we already know how tough this league race is going to be and how deep the league is, but to have like Virginia Tech and Pitt on your non-conference schedule and both be road games if you're West Virginia, I'm like, man, you are not setting yourself up for success. I mean, one of those like rivalry games is one thing, but having two of them, that's a bit tricky. But that's
mad at Neil Brown.
Exactly. They've got to go to Virginia Tech in a couple of weeks. And Virginia Tech may not be that good, but point still stands. I thought TCU looked really good the other night against Colorado. I think they ran it for just under 300 yards. You're not real sure what you're getting with Garrett Riley, Lincoln's brother, is the OC, and Sonny Dykes, the air raid disciple and all those things. But they ended up running it for nearly 300 yards, and so that they'll be plenty salty, I think. And do you take anything away from any of the other results? I mean, Texas blowout, Baylor blowout, Iowa State blowout, Kansas State kind of a blowout, Texas Tech obviously blowouts. I don't know how many real but if you look at next weekend's schedule,
yep.
I mean, there's red flashing lights all over that thing. I mean, buckle up. The next weekend will be really fun around the league because you can make some serious noise, or you can have a week where the conference sends out a, hey, we're sorry, we screwed this thing up, tweet. Because, I mean, Alabama's coming to Austin, and I think there's not many like on paper gimmies. Baylor's got to go to Provo and play BYU. Obviously the Red Raiders are hosting the Cougs, but on and on and on it goes. Iowa State. There's a lot of juice on that schedule next week.
Yeah, right now as it stands, I'm seeing Texas is 19-point underdogs against Alabama. K-State a favorite by about a touchdown over Missouri. The Red Raiders -2.5 over Houston. The Cyhawk War, Iowa State, and Iowa, West Virginia, Kansas, Oklahoma, Kent State. You got Oklahoma State, Arizona State, and as you mentioned, BYU and Baylor. So should be pretty interesting. And yeah, I agree. There wasn't really anything else to take away from any of those games, really, aside from those three. I did hate to see all the rushing yardage for Texas Christian. Good grief, that looks like a scary thing, possibly. And the fact that they finished with 21 points, I think, in the fourth quarter. I mean, a really strong finish on the road might say something about some of the intangibles of that football team. So definitely got my attention.
Or Colorado's.
Granted, touche there. What did you make of Oklahoma State? Because that was one of those that got off to a wild start. I mean, you saw them lighten it up, huge score, and I don't know, maybe Central Michigan just a little tougher or a little too tough to die in that way, but certainly not the finish you want if you're a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, it was 51-15, I think, toward the end of – I think that may have been close to halftime. Maybe it was early in the third quarter. And, look, the coaching point is after the game, guys, we got to be able to finish. I mean, we just mentally lose focus, and we start rotating in guys, and y'all can't keep the intensity up. I mean – but, you know how this goes. We've seen this around here before when you just kind of get a big lead fairly quickly. You take the foot off the gas and you exhale. But Central Michigan was they, because, again, that game wasn't interesting at all, and then it very much was. But I think it speaks to Jim Knowles not being there anymore, and that they've got some players to replace on that side of the ball. So they may have to outscore people, because the big takeaway for me in that one is Spencer Sanders and Brennan Presley are going to be a problem for a lot of folks in this league, because, say whatever you want, man, Oklahoma State just figures out a way to win. And if Mike Gundy could beat Oklahoma consistently, we talk about him completely different, but I would completely take what they've done over the last decade plus as a Red Raider.
No question.
Multiple double-digit win seasons, and we talk about 08 around here all the time, and it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, and they've done this a lot. They won the Fiesta Bowl last year with a huge comeback over Notre Dame. On and on it goes. So they'll be there. They'll win. And Spencer Sanders, though, if he stays more consistent, look out.
Wild. That was a wild finish. Some other interesting results, but it's going to get even wilder coming up this weekend. Looking forward to it. Of course, we'll have plenty more this week on Locked On Texas Tech when it comes down to the Red Raiders and the Cougars here in the 806. That does it for us today. Appreciate you for joining us and making us your first listen. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. And after Locked On Texas Tech, for your second listen, I want to invite you to check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 8-episode extravaganza to get you primed and ready for the NFL season. That is the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022. Check it out on the Locked On Podcast Network. Enjoyed it, Chris. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
And please subscribe on YouTube, man. They tell us we need to get these numbers up, so we hope you like what we're doing here. Please subscribe on YouTube, man, and keep hope alive, everybody.
We're hanging by a thread. They're holding my dog hostage. They want the numbers up. Please subscribe on YouTube.
It doesn't cost you anything. Yes,
cost you nothing, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Really appreciate all of you tuning in through our first week. Have definitely been encouraged by the support that we've gotten, and we're just getting started. So be back around coming up tomorrow for more on the Red Raiders on Locked On Texas Tech.